Batman and vampires. While many think of the Dark Knight in terms of his detective skills or his colorful rogues gallery, there are many other types of ways that the Dark Knight has been imagined, and that includes him taking on the supernatural, and not just in Elseworlds tales or other stories where he himself becomes a vampire. Batman has a long history going up against creatures of the night. Other creatures of the night, I guess. The first time he fought a vampire was in 1939 in Detective Comics 31, a mere 4 issues after his initial debut in Detective Comics 27. And he faced the Monk, a character who's described as both a vampire and a werewolf. We'll get to why a bit later. But before we take a look at Batman's first supernatural encounter, I'm thrilled to announce the sponsor of today's video, Global Comics. Global Comics is a digital entertainment platform that is home to many comics. And as of October 15th, they are home to 400 DC titles. Not issues, titles. So on top of all of the other comics, graphic novels, manga, webcomics that were already on the platform, now there's even more to choose from. There is an eye towards the iconic characters with Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, but it's not just series like that. You have things like 100 Bullets, American Vampire, Hellblazer, various Elseworlds fare. There's a lot to choose from, and it's a great way to check out some titles that you might have been curious about but weren't sure how to get into. Global Comics also offers the feature to be able to download and read offline in an offline mode on the app. Many of the works also feature panel-to-panel reading capability, currently rereading Gotham Academy. You have a mix of older comics and ongoing series. There's a lot to dive into right off the bat. With Global Comics, you can sign up for free, or you can create a membership to gain access to all the titles and issues. And if you're interested, I have a link for you down below. And if you click the link, you can use my code GCXCasually for 33% off your membership. I am personally very into this app and enjoying going back and looking over a whole host of series. And now to take a look at some classic Batman fare. Batman first encountered the Monk, also known as the Mad Monk, in the tale Batman versus the Vampire. So there's no question as to what's about to go on in this story. This tale was written by Gardner Fox with art by Bob Kane and Sheldon Moldoff. It's an early tale and one without Bill Finger, who was responsible for a lot of Batman's lore and its evolution. While Gardner Fox would be responsible for a lot of iconic tales amongst other characters, this Batman outing is a bit bare bones. So issues 31 and 32, where the story concludes, are a fascinating look back from that standpoint, as things feel very loose. Issue 31's cover is a classic. Batman standing tall as the moonlit castle background is layered both behind and on top of him. The Mad Monk in his standout red regalia carrying a victim upwards towards his keep. This cover is also really selling the long ears, the way they go up into the lettering of the Detective Comics title. We also in the opening get that panel that's part of his origin in Detective Comics 33 here, the one of him standing against the rooftop posed as if he's about to pounce, and it is said that it was a swipe from a Tarzan image, which if you look at the original Tarzan image, makes a lot of sense. This issue also introduced Julie Madison, Batman's fiancée, or rather Bruce Wayne's fiancée, and it just drops her right there, already affianced. It's very abrupt. He comes upon her in a trance trying to take a man to her master, the Monk. Also, you can see her shoulder, the scandal. The Batman recognizes his fiancée, Julie Madison. Julie, you! What am I doing here? Who are you? But if you were taking me home, how do you know where I live? Why won't you talk? You won't tell me a thing. Julie, don't get into a car with strange men dressed like bats, even if it's a nice car. What he's driving in that panel is the OG Batmobile pre-Batmobile, meaning that it's Batman's car and they designate it as such, but it's almost entirely an ordinary car. In Detective Comics 30, they mentioned that it was super fast, but it still just basically looks fairly ordinary. You first see him driving a car like this in his first appearance. When you go through the Golden Age tales, you get to see things kind of come together, as mentioned. I don't count this as the first appearance as the Batmobile because he doesn't call it that. It's called the Batmobile in Detective Comics 48, but it's still very much an ordinary car, minus the Bat hood ornament. It starts to look more Bat-like in Batman number 5, but this isn't about the history of the Batmobile. We're here for vampires. The next morning, Julie must tell Bruce about her strange encounter with the Batman. Bruce, there's something I must tell you. A man dressed as an enormous bat found me last night on the street about to kill a man.
Good Lord, Julie, suppose you had. We'd better see Dr. Trent right away.
Bruce takes her to see a doctor who himself appears to be hypnotized in some way. He suggests that Julie was hypnotized and that she should take a cruise to Paris and then to Hungary, the home of werewolves. There is nothing strange about that. Well, actually, Bruce thinks there's lots of things strange about that, but just lets her go. On her own as well. He has Batman things to do. But back at the Wayne mansion,
Julie would be surprised to know her Batman is her future husband.
I mean, I suppose so. Mostly because she's just surprised that Batman even exists in the first place. This issue also introduces the Bat Gyro, and this is the first appearance of Batarangs, which have a heavy emphasis on their boomerang ability, at least in this outing. So it's a significant issue from that standpoint, as of course these would become a staple. He's definitely ready for werewolves and vampires. There are panels in this, just moments where people see Batman and they're freaking out. They just kind of happen and they move along from them, but they are there, so they're worth noting.
Look! A bat! The end of the world. We're attacked by Martians!
Batman arrives on Julie's cruise and the monk just appears. And he's able to slow Batman down with his hypno eyes. And he ducks the special batarang and then leaves. And the panels are very abrupt because it's not clear how or when he leaves. It just cuts to later panels and Batman is looking for Julie. I guess he didn't check what hotel she was staying at before she left on the cruise, even though he bought the ticket. This issue feels like there are missing connective panels, never to the point where one can't figure out what's supposed to be going on, but enough so that it's not very detailed. It's one of those ones where you must accept it in broad strokes. Like how when he finally finds Julie in Paris and enters her room, he's attacked by a giant gorilla. The monk had a death trap waiting in this building, so it's kind of implied that he must have sent Julie to a building where he had a location or a base. But again, a lot of things are just meant to be inferred. The point is there's a huge death trap and a snake den. Issue 31 really has Batman use the batarang that's like a boomerang several times, but it's not enough to stop the monk. The Batman, in full pursuit of the fleeing monk. Suddenly, a bar door drops between the Batman and the monk. Die here, you fool, while I send the girl Julie on to my castle in Hungary to feed my werewolves. The gigantic gorilla is lowered as the Batman is caged by bars all about him. A giant gorilla is no match for Batman. He's able to escape and also save Julie, who is being transported to Hungary via car. But now it's personal or something. It's off to Hungary to face werewolves. Issue 32 has the briefest of recaps as to what's going on and then launches you right into Batman in Hungary looking for the monk. And this section has some minor moments that seem to have been inspired by Bram Stoker's Dracula. The speeding carriage ride towards the palace is one of them. But in the carriage, he doesn't find the monk, but a woman who he's gassed. And so he feels kind of bad about that and takes her back to the creepy hotel he's staying at with Julie, because he also brought her to Hungary. Why? Because the plot needs her there. That or he's just a terrible fiance. It could be both. The Batman arrives at his hotel embedded deep in the Carlathan Mountains in Hungary.
She's coming too. I hope Julie is safe.
She's gonna be even safer the more random strangers you bring to this hotel. Who are you? My name is Dala. I seem to have been kidnapped by your friend here. That night, the Batman safeguards his fiancée and the stranger. But Dala is not to be trusted, as it turns out she is a vampire who has fed on Julie. And in some ways, she's the more devious character of this tale. Because from the start, the monk is over-the-top, death trap evil, but Dala's a bit more complex. She plays victims that she can lure Batman to her master.
You shall talk now, Dala, you witch. I thought you were an accomplice of your evil master who calls himself the monk. So you are vampires.
Which is vampires, werewolves. You want to know where the monk is? You fear him. Well, I do too. I'll tell you where you may find him if you promise to kill him. This is a Golden Age Batman tale, so the answer to that is yes. Plus, he's a vampire, so fictional rules. It doesn't fully count, like a zombie or a robot. You fool, pitting your puny body against the mighty monk. My friend the Batman. So you are still alive. Adala. Welcome. Why were there those pauses there? There's a history there. Things to infer, but this story's not going to do that. Instead, once more, we see hints that Dala is more the one to be afraid of in this tale, for after the monk has Batman hypnotized, is ready to do away with him, she's the one who insists that he summon Julie there just to make Batman suffer. And so, the monk compels her. Soon your Julie will be as we are, werewolves, to ravish all living men. And you shall be dead, helpless to avenge her. Now, by modern standards, the fact that they're jumping between the terms vampire and werewolf may appear a tad jarring because they've been so clearly separated, they've diverged, but there was a period historically where in certain regions the terminology would have been used a tad more interchangeably because of the evolution of the terms that they're coming from. This is pulling from early Eastern European folklore, so Hungary, the Balkans, Romania, where the ideas could be associated with a couple of creatures. We could be looking at Strigoi. They have a lot of vampiric traits, but also some werewolf traits. You also have the Prikolisi from Romanian folklore, and you have some tales where creatures will be described as werewolves in life, but vampires in death. Creatures like Vrikolikas. Sure, you're all laughing at my pronunciation of all of these. And you also have the fact that vampires would have the ability to transform into wolves in certain tales. I just thought it was worth detouring to briefly cliff notes about, because for some it may read as if it's an error or an oddity, but for the time period, the way they're utilizing the term, it isn't all that strange, particularly not for the region they've set this in, and also for the fact that they are drawing a bit from Dracula. Why did I say it like that? He could transform into and control wolves as well. Not that any of this linguistic information or evolution would have saved Batman at all. He'll have to get out of this with his wits and a gun. The monk transforms into a wolf to summon more wolves to tear Batman apart, and Batman has to fight them. Now, like many villains, the monk feels very confident in this death trap, and so him and Dala just leave to go sleep. This gives Batman time to craft a silver bullet. He gets his gun that he only had for a few issues, but at this point he still has it. Silver is also something that's associated with being able to hurt vampires, but has come to be more associated as time went on with killing werewolves. But don't worry, if you got some silver, you can kill both. You know, for the next time you face off against the Children of the Night. Batman states that it's only in killing the monk that he'll be able to free Julie from his thrall. So he goes to where they're sleeping in their coffins, and the Batman pauses before the open tombs of the vampires. Why were they open? Wow, that's just too much confidence, overconfidence.
Never again will you harm any mortal being.
The spell is broken, and life returns once more to Julie. I don't know who you are, but you saved my life, and I shall be forever grateful. Fini. Ooh, French, fancy. Is Julie gonna tell Bruce how close she was holding Batman? She can blame that on the blood loss. Now this is a classic tale and has an iconic cover, but it is a bit of a rougher read, even for a Golden Age tale. 31 more so than 32, which is more structured and the plot flows more organically, but it is a bit of a jumbled experience overall. However, the core idea is exciting. Batman versus the vampire and his evil minion on a globe-trotting adventure to save his brainwashed love. It is also part of Batman's evolution as it introduces some items and characters. And there are a few standout sequences, like the battle with the wolves for one. You have Dala's betrayal, and then from 31 you have the first appearance of the monk, who does have a rather striking design. It's just so red. Now the monk was not forgotten and has been brought back a few ways in a few different eras. For this video I want to look at the Matt Wagner series from 2006 through 2007. Not the Jerry Conway Bronze Age version in of which Batman becomes a vampire. That is very cool and another time. The reason I want to look at the 2006 miniseries is that it's an updated retelling of this story. And it's so interesting to see what comes forward and how they modernize the concept, especially as it was an era that was doing some Golden Age retellings, but inside of the modern contextualization of Batman, working all those concepts that took their time coming together in the Golden Age and then presenting them all as one. So it's interesting to see how all of those things could be reconciled. So we're going to look at Batman the Mad Monk. Matt Wagner also did an adaptation of the Hugo Strange story, The Monster Men, beforehand, and this is a sequel to that. But these do more than adapt a single story. They actually pull many threads and put them together, and then it uses one of those stories as a base. They take into account the overall environment and Batman's positioning on his journey. And this still positions this as the original Batman's first encounter with the supernatural, because the Monster Men are more science experiments gone wrong. Or right? I guess you have to ask Hugo Strange. And what the series manages to do is it does so without making this feel atonal to the Dark Knight, even as the rest of the story is about Officer Gordon and him forging a partnership, as he fights the corrupt police force, the changing gang structures under Maroni and Falcone, and the arrival of Batman's supervillains. But it manages to make all these things fit together. Batman the Mad Monk was a 6-issue miniseries written and drawn by Matt Wagner. Julie Madison had already been introduced in the Monster Men mini, and she had a different backstory. She had also been introduced briefly beforehand, but this is kind of its own thing, in terms of the canon and this kind of little thing they were doing. Here she was a recently graduated law student. The Golden Age version would eventually be assigned the job of actress before she dumped Bruce. This Julie and Bruce are in a relationship in this series, and Julie is much more of a character here than in issues 31 and 32. But she did have her moments in the Golden Age, they just weren't really in those stories. In this miniseries, she's getting frustrated by how often Bruce can't take her on their dates or just doesn't show up. Not just because she likes him, but because of how that's making her behave. She doesn't feel entirely like herself, but she's really into him. A decent amount of this series is told from Julie's point of view, so you get to have a better sense of what she's going through. You get to have multiple perspectives. You get Batman's, Gordon's, Julie's, and Dala's. And there's a build up here. It doesn't hop straight into her being possessed by the monk. We get to see that develop. The monk himself is more gradually introduced, not fully appearing on the scene till issue 2. Who comes first is Dala, who maintains her position as highly villainous. Dala is tied back to Hungary and is maintained by saying she has an accent, and then there's some research that happens from Batman later on. She's now here luring victims to not just the monk, but his brotherhood. He now has a group of people who are kind of following him in hopes of becoming immortal. He's got this cult of thrill seekers and devout people. While she's not herself a full vampire or fully immortal or anything like that, Dala is a loyal follower and his right-hand woman. She's the most important of all the brotherhood. She even sleeps in a coffin in the same room as him, which is a nod to the final panels of Detective Comics 32. Unlike the older story, Dala never plays victim here, and instead we get multiple scenes from her victims' perspectives, and it's uncomfortable. Plus her own narration is there showing that she's entirely loyal to the monk. They play a tiny bit with some of the werewolf aspects in terms of language, but they don't ever call them werewolves. Here they're firmly established as vampires. But when they're talking about his cult, they talk about the shadows of the moon. And when he's first introduced in issue 2, it's all through Dala's perspective. They keep the design pretty much the same, but it works. They managed to make it look kind of eerie. While he himself doesn't transform into a wolf, in fact, they keep lots of the supernatural things he does to a minimum. He does still have pet wolves, and he is still able to kind of command them. Another thing that's kept the same is the silver as a weakness, but Batman's not going to have a gun here. He's going to make a silver batarang, which looks a lot cooler. This when Batman starts to consider the fact that there may be something supernatural going on here with all the people being exsanguinated and mutilated around Gotham, but he's really reluctant to think that or accept it. It only really hits home for him when he sees the twin pinpricks on Julie's neck that maybe he actually has to entertain the idea that that's what's going on. The monk is given more details in this mini aside from having the Brotherhood. He's given a name, and the comic actually takes time out to tell you how to pronounce it. Nikolai Tepes? Yes, but it's pronounced Sipes, a very old name. And he has a reason to not kill Julie, but also to hypnotize her. He's trying to get her resources, her wealth, and then add that to his own. In this way, they also maintain the vampiric lure and hypnotism aspects. And the art for Julie is just coming more and more under his thrall, losing herself as he's just draining her more and more. It's very well done. Julie is also more vulnerable to his and Doll's machinations here because she's feeling so neglected by Bruce and isolated from her father. This from events that started in the first mini, but they're pretty clearly defined here. Now, instead of having this being a globetrotting thing where they hop from country to country, even though there are more issues, they keep it more localized inside of Gotham. Instead, the monk has this old keep that's just a little outside of it. But it definitely maintains the look of a classic Eastern European castle. Batman once more follows a hypnotized doll towards the monk, who has spent issue after issue being built up as cruel and dangerous. In another edition, they have Batman research him a bit more and they hint that maybe he's another character. They were kind of doing some sequel baiting. Batman also gets more and more beat up throughout this, and his battle with the monk is condensed into 2 encounters. The first includes a version of the Death Trap, which like Detective Comics 31, he's just left in. But this time there's no giant gorilla. We have one of those pin walls that's coming to crush him. He also does fight the wolves once more, and it's utterly brutal. He breaks one's spine against a wall. It's painful. It's in the final issue where we have the final showdown with the monk, who in a level of increased dramatics was also going to sacrifice Julie to his followers. Since he now has her assets, he has no use for her except for her blood. The showdown between the monk and Batman feels a bit more earned here, and it's not just because Julie feels like more of a character, but because Batman has more of his own motivations for wanting to go up against him. In fact, Julie isn't positioned as being there directly because of her involvement with Batman. There are some steps in between. It feels like the kind of thing that could have happened whether Batman was there or not, which is part of what's being worked through for Bruce. Is he creating these circumstances or not? But there are layers there because indirectly it is kind of because of him. Batman's also working through this new breed of criminal arising in Gotham and having to contend with that. So he's angry that the monk is seemingly a vampire, and right up until the end he's trying to rationalize it. Now, this isn't the Golden Age, so he doesn't murder him with a silver bullet in his sleep. No, the monk gets struck by lightning, which is so abrupt, it's a little funny. Then we get some sequel bait that maybe he survived and he'll come to face the bat again. Dala did not make it, or she seemingly didn't make it because she got taken out by Julie, who in this version, the breakup still happens, but she also learns that Bruce is Batman, and that's part of why they break up. Since Batman inadvertently drove her father insane, that's another element that's brought forward and incorporated. The idea that Batman is scary and that has an impact on people. This series is an excellent reworking of the original Golden Age stories. It pulls forward not just those stories, but a variety of elements. Each issue has a standout cover, and the vampirism is made to feel more in keeping with the tone of Batman as he had evolved, thanks to the cult elements and a diminished focus on the monk's supernatural abilities without entirely eliminating them. Condensing the main action to Gotham's locations and then adding some of the details as coming from other countries also makes things feel a bit less rushed. It feels tighter. As mentioned, there were lots of gaps in the original tale, and this series fills them with the other details from the rest of the era that it's working through. Everything just feels more cohesive, and there are moments where the monk is genuinely menacing. It's really cool to see something that could have gone down as a story being treated as throwaway or from a bygone era being updated with such respect and in such a cool way. The elements of darkness that are added match or elaborate on things from the original text rather than twisting the original purpose. The original stories are definitely worth reading from a historical perspective, and if you're one who can get into the Golden Age kind of flow, they can be very fun and have their entertaining moments. However, for the Golden Age, they're not the strongest that's out there. But the Update series is a really solid mini all on its own. One could read and enjoy it without having prior knowledge of the original stories it's based upon. Although some feel that Batman and vampires and those kind of things just shouldn't mix. And so this story may feel a bit like it's coming out of left field, and there is more one can glean from it if they are familiar with the Golden Age things it's working through. Otherwise, some of the references and characters may fall a bit flat. Some may also just not enjoy the tone, or may not feel it's a necessary tale at all. Just leave those stories back there. There were a lot of plot points in this series that I didn't really get the chance to focus on because we were looking at the monk, so I think it's worth checking out. But those are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. Are you here for when Batman engages with the supernatural? Did you like this tale? Did you not like it? Do you want to see even more of the Mad Monk? Your thoughts, I want to hear them. And if you're interested in checking out Global Comics, where they have even more DC characters fighting vampires, my link is down below. Thanks so much for taking some time today to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.